Okay, so we're talking with Jim McBride, who's here at True False, the True False Festival, where his film David Holtzman's Diary from 1967,
somewhere
around there. It took place in 67.
67.
Okay, 67. And critic Eric Hines chose it as part of this new series that they've started this year called Neither Nor. It's having 2 screenings, right? Was it just 2? Mm-hmm. And it's now a whole new audience is getting to see David Holtzman's Diary, the film that keeps on giving. Right?
I guess.
How does it feel, Jim, to make a film 40 some years back? It's
I can't count either.
40s. Well, I was made around the time of your film.
Well, you must know how old you are.
It's true. But how does it feel to make a film early in your career and have like this, young audiences they embrace and some connect to it. And then you have other films. So and they're part of the lexicon. They're part of the. They're like great films. They're terrific.
Well, thanks. What's the question?
What's that like?
For people to like the movie that I
no,
made
not that so much. Not so much that, but specifically this film, like that. It goes all. It was something you made so early on in your career.
Well, I've never not been proud of it, and the truth is that in its early days, it got very little distribution. There were really people. I don't even know how people saw it. To tell you the truth, there were only a few prints of it, and there was no distributor for a long time. Mm-hmm. So it's. I run into people all the time who say, "Oh, I saw your movie in my film school class or something like that." But I honestly don't know how they got it until a couple of years ago when it was restored by the Pacific Film Archive and then released on DVD.
Right, by Kino Lorber.
Right.
Yeah.
So
it has been on YouTube, but that's not how some of these students have seen
this film. I
didn't
even know that. Huh.
You don't remember? I think we talked about that when I talked to you last time, that I had watched. Maybe I watched My Girlfriend's Wedding. Another.
Said,
yeah, and that had been where they put on the tiny little player and they divide it into sections. It's like, how can we make a filmmaking experience the worst possible way? Anyway, so you come to True False and you've seen some films here and you're showing yours and you're enjoying yourself.
Yes.
Correct? Does this remind you of when you were like a young filmmaker and you were hitting the festivals and?
Well, it's not so long ago that I hit my last festival, and there was a time when I used to go to festivals quite frequently, and I mean it's a kind of culture, that is very gemütlich. It's very friendly and fun, and you meet other filmmakers and you see other movies. And what's bad?
No, very little, very little. Not even the cupcakes are good here.
I'm nursing it.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Oh, I have one too. So I remember it was shortly after the Blu-ray was released by Kino Lorber, about 2 years ago, if that long, maybe a year and a half ago, something like that.
A couple of years, yeah.
Okay, and I got a chance to watch it, and I remember reaching out and we talked, and. I just know that someone who grew up in New York, that there was a very nostalgic experience seeing David Holtzman's Diary.
Huh.
It was kind of a New York, even as a kid, the way I remember it. How much of of David Holtzman's Diary was autobiographical?
Well, none of it.
What? It's a work of fiction?
It's made up.
What was that process like?
Well, I mean, I don't even know. But, I mean, the setting was, it was where I grew up and where I lived at the time. I don't know exactly how I got the idea to do this movie. I was, I think, fortunate to get interested in movies and start out in movies in a time when there was a tremendous amount of different kinds of stuff that was going on in the movie world, from the French New Wave to the cinema verite to American underground films was kind of flourishing in those days. And they were all kind of different approaches to trying something different. And they were all very, very different from sort of confection that Hollywood movies were at that particular moment in time. Kind of Doris Day and stuff like that.
Right.
So it was just a very exciting time to kind of see a lot of movies and, just see a lot of different approaches to making films. And I had attended NYU Film School and sort of learned the rudiments, and I was kind of working at odd jobs in the industry.
What years were you
Well,
at
I
NYU?
graduated in 1962, I think, so. And I was very just passionately interested in movies. But I must say, NYU at that time was kind of very oriented towards kind of socially relevant filmmaking. And even though I just sort of disparaged Hollywood, when I got out of NYU and I began to sort of explore on my own, and sort of picking up a lot from the French critics of the time, I kind of discovered the great Hollywood, filmmakers like Hitchcock and Howard Hawks and John Ford and 10,000 others. So it was a great, exciting educational experience too. But how I came up with David Holzman's diary, I really couldn't tell you exactly, except that I was kind of interested in cinema verite. And this whole idea of somehow that it was kind of there was a kind of revolution, a technological revolution going on at the time, where they had developed these lightweight cameras that could do sync sound, faster film stock.
I believe D.A. Pennebaker had a hand in that.
D.A. Pennebaker had a big hand in it, and so did his partner Ricky Leacock, and so did the Maysles brothers, and I knew them all in those days. He's not here, is he, Pennebaker? I knew he was being honored, but
here?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Well,
no,
anyway.
I don't know.
But
he's honored, in a ongoing.
Well, I know he got a governor's award from the Academy this year.
Yes, you were fortunately coming up, in other words, around the time of a more portable, a lighter weight
sync sound equipment,
technology, right?
Yeah, and so theoretically, two guys, one with a camera and one with a tape recorder, could go into a real life situation and film it without disturbing it too much.
If I remember correctly, the opening scene of David Holzman's diary is the main character, David, was actually showing his audience the equipment.
Yeah.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, he demonstrates his equipment.
Yeah.
I was interested in
you were
all that
inspired
stuff,
by
and I was also interested in the literature of diaries, and but there was this idea, in the air that somehow this new technology somehow, for the first time, gave filmmakers a chance to discover the truth, as if there were some kind of actual objective truth. And so that seemed like a very kind of funny idea to me. So the idea of somebody making a film about himself trying to discover the truth and not succeeding, I guess that was the basic idea. I'm not sure exactly how it came about.
Well, were you indulging at the time in various...
Sorry?
No, never mind. I was asking if you were indulging also maybe in stimulants and other things that might have...
That came a little later in life.
Okay. No. How was this film received? I remember something about some sort of disasters, and like the first reel or something was lost, or your car was broken into.
What actually happened was that I started to make the film. I was working at a company that made sort of promotional films, and I used to borrow their equipment and shoot a little bit here and there with an actor that I knew and a camera operator I knew. And I got fired from the job. And so I packed up all of the film that I'd shot into a cardboard box and stuck it in the trunk of my car. And 2 weeks later, when I came back to find it, it was gone. Somebody had stolen it. Mm. So, that was kind of the end of that for about a year. And then I met up with a whole new... I was working with a bunch of better people, let's put it that way. No, it's not a good way to put it, but I sort of felt... I had to tell you, I felt a great relief when it was stolen.
Oh,
it really wasn't very good.
Okay.
And so it's great to have a second chance.
Yeah.
And,
right.
And I hooked up with some people, two people in particular, Mike Wadley, who was the cameraman.
Right, from Woodstock?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm. And Kit Carson, who plays David Holzman and invented a lot of the dialogue.
Yeah.
And so the three of us set about making it.
It's terrific. Where's Kit Carson today?
Kit Carson's in Texas, and Michael Wadley's in Wales.
Uh-huh. Kit Carson, where in Texas is he? Do you know?
Well, he's from Dallas, and I assume that's where he is.
Are you in touch at all?
We're in touch.
I wonder if he was extended I don't know, an invitation maybe to come to this? Or
I doubt it. I think he had been. He'd be here.
He
tends to show up whenever.
I see. At an opening.
The film is playing.
And so have you seen him in the last, I don't know, when was the last time you saw him?
I guess, not that long ago. I mean, a couple of years maybe. The film was screened at Harvard a year or two ago, and we both went for that. Mm-hmm. And we keep in touch from time to time.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting when you're kind of you're kind of linked together through an experience like making a film like that, and I wonder what that experience is like to have that kind of relationship over.
Well, it's just like any relationship, Mm-hmm. I mean, it goes through stages, and he and I actually wrote the script of Breathless together, too, another film that I directed
with him.
Kit.
Oh, I didn't know that.
We wrote it together, and he was very instrumental in getting it set up.
Really?
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought that up, because tell me why in the world you would... I mean, you already alluded to your influence, being influenced by the New Wave, the French New Wave, as a young filmmaker, to actually take on the idea of remaking Breathless. That is ballsy. I mean,
that's a really stupid idea, isn't
it? Yeah, you pulled it off.
I thought so at the time,
but you pulled it off.
Well, thanks.
As far as most people are concerned, right? It was a success, wasn't it?
It was a modest success, yeah.
But still,
many people hated it, and many people loved it.
Well, I would imagine a percentage of the people that hated it because you dared to tinker with this, with the Bible or whatever you want.
Yeah.
So
they were absolutely right.
So where did that level of?
It's just another one of those things that one kind of stumbles into. I mean, Breathless was a very important film to me. It had a big effect on me. I loved it.
Yes.
I saw it half a dozen times. So it was a very meaningful thing to me.
Sure.
And there was a certain point in my life where I couldn't figure out how to keep making movies in New York anymore, and I decided to give it a shot in Hollywood. And the kinds of things that I was proposing, nobody was really interested in. And funnily enough, somebody said to me, "Well, look, you're an unknown quantity. So if you expect anybody to invest in you, you need to bring them unknown quantity, like a best-selling novel or play or something like that. And you need money for that sort of thing, and I didn't have it.
Right.
But it occurred to me, probably in some stoned moment.
This was the next stage that you referred.
Breathless is like, it's really an American story. I mean, it was sort of
right.
It was dedicated to Monogram Pictures, and it was the characters
Absolutely.
were kind of.
There was it was all referencing American gangster films,
Bogart,
right? Sure,
all that stuff. So
the
on one level, so what I thought, well, this is kind of it's something that is famous, but probably hadn't been seen by a whole lot of American people, and so maybe. I don't know. I just thought maybe that's an idea, And then almost as soon as I had the idea, I was too embarrassed even to do anything about it. It just seemed really kind of dopey to me. But I don't know. I mentioned it to this friend of mine, a guy named Tom Luddy, who used to run the Pacific Film Archive, and he picked up the phone and called Godard. With whom he was friendly at the time, and said, "My friend here wants to do a remake of your movie." And he said, "Okay." It was the oddest thing.
That is bizarre. Bizarre.
It turned out that he had seen David Holzman's diary at some point, and so it didn't seem like a terrible idea to him.
Well, that in itself is pretty cool, that Godard had seen your film.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, it got a lot more respect in Europe than it ever did.
Sure,
here.
That makes sense.
But yeah, it was a thrill for me. But then, there I was faced. Now I have to do it. And what the fuck do you do?
Yes. Well, you get Richard Gere.
No, Richard Gere was way, way, way down the line. What I did was sit down with Kit, and we wrote the script. And we were able to get a kind of development deal. It's a long, complicated story.
Sure.
But the bottom line is from the day we wrote the script, it was like 5 years until we actually got to make the movie. So it was a long, arduous process, and a lot of that time was spent trying to find an actor who would be willing to take a shot at a role like that, and also with an unknown director like me.
Right. Well, fairly unknown, but in Hollywood, right. Well, I guess Richard Gere, it sounded as though you were saying that maybe besides the process of getting the film, the screenplay written, the adaptation rather, and all the other business of getting it off the ground, you might have seen other actors or contemplated other actors. But Richard Gere, I guess up to that point, maybe he had made,
he was a big star. He'd done
already.
Officer and a Gentleman.
He had already done Officer and a Gentleman.
He'd done
wow. Okay.
Schrader film.
He did. Right. Well, there was the Looking for Mr. Goodbar was maybe his first thing that people noticed him in, and then he had his first lead in
American Gigolo. Also.
American Gigolo. Thank you. Yeah. And he had done theater. He had done Bent on Broadway at that point, so he was kind of. I remember that was the first time I knew of him from living in New York. But anyway, so. He was attached, and then he became attached.
It's a long story, but he ultimately relented. Basically, he didn't want to do it. He didn't want to do it with me.
Okay.
And it's really, I don't know whether you want to get into this or not, but the two different directors became attached to it. I was thrown off the project essentially.
That's interesting, though. You come up with it. You get thrown off of it.
Happens all the time.
Sure.
I mean, the truth is we went to John Travolta, Al Pacino, Gary Busey was another person I was interested in. He had just done the Buddy Holly story. But each one of them didn't want to have anything to do with an unknown director. And they all said, well, I'll do it, but, with somebody I choose.
Right.
And finally it ended up with Richard Gere, and it ended up, with people saying to me, you're never going to get this movie made if you insist on directing it. But if you let somebody else direct it, you'll get big writer's credit, and you'll maybe get a chance the next time. So what could I do? So they took it to Richard Gere. He gave them like a list of directors that he would work with, and they went through the list, and they came up with Michael Mann. And Michael Mann completely rewrote the screenplay, turned it into a different movie. They got into pre-production, and just at some point,
Godard is
he doesn't care.
I know.
Anyway, Michael Mann suddenly got the green light on another film that he had been developing, so he went off and did that. And I think I've got it reversed, but then they again said, why don't you let Jim do it? And Richard said, no way. And they got another director who also had the same experience of getting involved with the script and getting into pre-production and then getting greenlit on another project and leaving. So finally they were sort of left with, they had the financing, they had the star, they had the script, and they'd gone through his list of directors, and there was kind of nobody left, and he had to be finished by a certain date to do another movie. And at that point, I happened to run into Paul Schrader, whom I knew, and told him the story, and so he picked up the phone and called Richard Gere and said, meet with the guy at least. He's a decent guy. So I flew to New York and met with him, and we spent 3 days talking through the whole thing.
Really?
It was really it was an ordeal. It was but he finally said okay.
Right.
And once he said okay, he was totally committed, and he was great. And
yes.
We had a great experience, and it was a good time.
It's quite a story. And that, of course, then led to, once you made that, and because it was not a failure, it may not have been a big success, but it was certainly not a failure. It opened the door to make a number of other Hollywood larger.
I think I have to sort of correct you a little bit.
By all means.
It wasn't a failure,
make a lot of mistakes.
But it wasn't a success.
Okay.
And because it wasn't a success, it was a disappointment, because everybody thought it should be a success, or that it would be a success, or hoped that it would be a success. And when it wasn't a success, I was out on the street again for a couple of years.
Sure.
And each film that I made subsequent to that was not a free ride. Each one was some kind of epic saga.
Right. Yeah.
How it got made.
Well, we can talk about, of course, The Big Easy and the other Dennis Quaid, Great Balls of Fire, which were by any those two were successful Hollywood films, but still, did it turn you off to it? Did it turn you off to making films in Hollywood, or that you did have to be put through the grind every time, even though you did have a track record? It's very difficult and painful making movies in Hollywood. When you're actually making the movie, couldn't be more fun. But how you get to that point is incredibly difficult, or it was for me. And even though you look at those films that I made as being successes, in terms of the industry, not so much. So are you saying...
Even The Big Easy, which was a genuine success, it was a modest success. It wasn't...
A blockbuster.
It wasn't a huge...
Or even...
So it was never easy to get the next film going, and so it was never fun. And I hung in there for a long time, and I worked in television. I did I did a lot of other stuff, but it sort of became diminishing returns after a while. And
so what are you doing?
I'm not making movies.
Is that a declaration, or is...
Well, it's just the way it's kind of turned out. I mean, the last couple of things I did, and it was quite a while ago, were things that I sort of just did for hire, and I didn't really enjoy the experience, and I didn't like the work itself. And I just, as I say, it was kind of diminishing returns, and I didn't want to keep doing that, and the stuff I really wanted to do, nobody else did. You know?
Yeah. So, but if you come to a festival like this, do you feel any inspiration to, dare I say, even start from scratch on some level?
You know, I went down that road a couple of times over the years, but even working on that level costs some kind of money, and I was never able to raise quite enough. And I found that just as debilitating, and just as... I actually wrote a sequel to David Holzman's diary, which I
had no idea.
Tried to get on for years, and almost did several times, but in the end, not.
Oh, well, that's disappointing. What was the name of that? Did you come up with a title for something?
Well, it had several titles. But The Return of David Holzman was the one I liked.
Yeah, I do. I like that. That is very fitting.
Nobody else liked it.
No?
I'd get a different producer, and he'd ask me to change the title.
Maybe they would have preferred Breathless 2. I don't know. Or something more.
Oh, that's an interesting story, though, about Breathless.
Yeah.
When we finally, I made a deal with Godard. I met Godard at the time, when we set it up. And I got permission to try to write a script and try to make it an option for a year for nothing, with a certain amount of money that he would get if the movie got made. That option expired long before we ever got to make the movie. So when we actually were going to make the movie, the company had to go and renegotiate with him and pay him substantially more money, I think. But what they discovered during the kind of search for the chain of title, which is one of the legal things that you have to do,
yes,
is that he had actually sold the rights to a couple other people as well.
Oh, my God. That's funny.
Yeah. And one of them was himself. He made a film called Numéro 2, which means number 2, which had nothing to do with Breathless, but he got the money for it by telling people that he was doing a sequel to Breathless.
Bizarre. Did he make this Numéro 2?
Yeah.
I remember that one.
It's not one of his more famous ones.
Well, yeah. But he was a very prolific filmmaker, so interesting. And so we find ourselves here in Columbia, Missouri, on a cold, late winter evening, sharing small muffins, reminiscing on a career that spans decades. And are you planning on seeing anything else while you're here at True False?
Yeah, but I can't tell you what. I have things circled in my program.
Right. And then it's always a matter of what ends up sort of working. And
right.
Yeah, you have a heart out, as they say. Listen, but you're going to have to listen to my thank you and for making the time and fitting this in. I do really appreciate it, and I've enjoyed a lot of your work over the years, so it's a pleasure to meet you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.